Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. We're glad to have you with us. UUCS is a very welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique backgrounds, beliefs, or lifestyle. If you're one of our longtime members or have been here a short time, or if you're joining us for the first time today, we're delighted to have you. Welcome to everyone. Now please take a few moments to greet one another and be sure to say hi to someone you haven't met yet. Thank you. As always, we'll have more time to greet one another and share our stories during social hour after the service, which, as always, includes great coffee and good conversation. And there's a table at the back where you can pick up one of these red mugs if you are new, or if you just want to make sure that people talk to you. This is a good symbol of pay attention to me. We now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice. The symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community, and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. Our opening reflection is the poem "The Journey" by Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
Well, we're going to sing a hymn this morning that we don't often do, but it has some wonderful words. It's number 175, We Celebrate the Web of Life. I'll have Michelina play the whole thing through so you can hear it. Please stand in body or spirit.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones linked star to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air, which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Is it, you can hear me? Yes, great. This is the story time for children and for people of all ages, but I'd like for the children who are young, people at heart, to come up and join over here. Can you give me up? We're changing a little bit. Come on. Can you come over here, honey? Come on. Let's go and sit down over here, because you know what we're going to do? We're going to look at the picture up there. Yes. Oh, great. All see the picture? Can you see it? Good. You can see, and you know that's a map, huh? Can you see? Maybe I'm gonna get up here so I'm not quite so much in your way. So I am telling the story today of when the UUs went to Haiti. Does anybody know what an earthquake is? What's an earthquake? Oh, tectonic plates slipping by the side. We've got a knowledgeable person here. This is great. Yes. What? What, honey? It's tectonic plates slip by each other, the ground shakes a whole lot. And if it happens to be where buildings are and people are living, buildings can come tumbling down and people can get hurt or they can even die. And so this story is about the country of Haiti when an earthquake hit there, 2010. Anybody here? She did? Awesome. That's great. 2010 was 10 years ago. All right, that is very good. Oh, it's your birthday, January 12th, 2010. Oh, awesome. There was a 7.0 earthquake that hit the country of Haiti. Epicenter was in Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince is a capital, not well built, no building codes, and people were living in houses there that were just sides of boards leaning up against each other. And even the governor's mansion wasn't built to code. So when this earthquake hit, a lot of buildings came tumbling down. A tsunami can come afterwards, that's true. It didn't come to Haiti, though. That's right. We've got really some smart kids around here. This is really amazing, awesome. So Haiti was hit. Haiti was a very poor country, very poor country. And so when all of these people were hurt and all of these people died, there was no place for them to live in a lot of places around there. So then, this is really cool. I'm going to have to talk to you later. So people kind of built tent cities in Haiti and Port-au-Prince, but there were some people who said, enough is enough, I'm going to leave Port-au-Prince. I'm going to go someplace. And so, like, 500,000 people might have left Port-au-Prince to go to different places of Haiti, and about 60,000 of them moved up to the Central Plateau. And they went up to the Central Plateau, this is a land in the high mountains, and met with a man named Siobhan Baptiste. And Siobhan was leader of the MPP, which is the Papaya Peasant Movement. And papaya peasants are poor people and sometimes not thought of highly, but actually peasants are the people who can grow their own food and who can grow their own food. Are we on?
It depends on how you turn your neck, Barbara.
Okay. Should it be going now? Okay. All right. So Siobhan Baptiste was helping these peasants learn how to grow food and how to make a living for themselves. And he was doing a lot of things even before the earthquake. But when 60,000 people went to the Central Plateau, some of them met with him, and he said, you know what? I have a dream where people can build their own houses, where people can grow their own food, enough for them to eat, enough to sell in the marketplace, and to have educated children, because children didn't have schools there, and to have health care improved up there on the Central Plateau. This is his dream, and so that was a really exciting thing to do. And guess what? A couple of days after the earthquake, a Unitarian, I'm going to maybe hold this. Couple of days? Okay, a couple of days after the earthquake, a single Unitarian made her way from Dominican Republic, which shares the islands of Haiti, down across the river and over to Haiti. But instead of going to Port-au-Prince, she went to the Central Plateau to meet. We're going to try something else. Are we on now? Okay. Yay, okay. So she went to the Central Plateau to meet with Siobhan to see how the Unitarians could perhaps help up there. And they talked to each other, and they came up with a plan. And the plan was to build some eco-villages. And this was one of Siobhan's dreams, is to have a village, a community where people built their own homes, but grew their plants organically. They could sell them on the market. They could learn how to raise chickens and pigs and all sorts of other living creatures. And then the children could also go to school. His mission was to make sure education was topmost in these people's minds. But they had to come up and do it themselves. They had to build the houses themselves, and they had to learn all of this other stuff that they hadn't learned living down in Port-au-Prince. And so the first Unitarians went over there. We had a 5-year commitment, and during that time there were groups of us who went over. I was lucky enough to go 3 times. And so when we went over to Port-au-Prince, and we took a long bus ride up to this place to meet these people, to see what we could do about helping them or understanding what they're going through. Now, have any of you built a house? Have you ever built a house? I haven't either.
I made a house out of Legos.
You made a house out of Legos. That's a start. That's true. A candy house is a start too. But these people learned how to build their own houses, and they had to make their houses. How many of you all have a garden? You have a garden, and do you grow food in it? Do you grow flowers in it? What? Turkeys? Okay. Well, turkeys, there are no turkeys in Haiti. There are chickens, though, so I can tell you that. And cows. Well, there aren't cows in Haiti either. There are some, but not where these people lived. But they build their house, and you know what? These houses that they built are not super fancy. You can see up in there, but they're very proud of the houses that they built. And we went in, and they're 2-bedroom houses, 2-room houses, and the kitchen was outside. So they got to do a lot of this work for making their own community. They learned how to grow their plants. And so when we went up there, can you go back one more? Thank you. So on the side of there, you can see, do you know what they grew first because the soil wasn't good? They grew them in tires. They used tires. They raised them above the ground, and they started composting the soil. Do you know what composting is? What is composting? Actually, that's part of it, but composting, yes.
It's taking old materials and I guess they're kind of like rotting it and they turn into moist.
Right. So they composted there too. And that was how they started growing there. And so everybody who moved into a house got their own garden and their own tires that they could start growing in, as well as growing plants together communally that they could sell out on the market. Okay, so now we can go to the next one. Thank you. So what did we do when we went up there? We met the people. We got to go out in the fields, and we were helping them. And I have to put help in quotes. They were very tolerant of our inability to work really hard or to do a lot of this stuff that they were doing. But we did move rocks and bricks and dislodge plants. We weeded a rice paddy, and I will always appreciate rice now for how much work goes into doing that. But the women there carried water in 5-gallon buckets up to where they were building the houses, so they needed the cement for it. So they worked really hard. They were really nice to us, and at the end of the day, they even thanked us. Can you go to the next? All right, so the dream I said was a school. So 6 villages were built, and a school was built. And there was a Atlantic church group who helped with the translation of books into Creole, which is the language that they speak, not French. There were no books, children's books in Creole. So they learned it. They go to school, and they are thrilled to be able to go to school and learn how to read and write. And that is one of the things that the parents of these people living in the eco-village pledged to have their children go to school. And so, you know, we were talking with Siobhan afterwards. We were really impressed with all of the work that they did, with how friendly they were to us. But we said, you know, we didn't do that much. I mean, we worked a little, sweated a lot, and they worked a lot more and sweated a lot more. And so we said, you know, what did we do? And so if you can turn to the next page. Siobhan said, what you did was show up. You showed up and you let the world know that they weren't forgotten. And you can also tell the rest of the people when you go back home what we're doing. And so this is what I'm doing here today, is telling you that when you hear about Haiti and you hear that these are people who are really struggling hard, that there's really good people over in Haiti who are trying hard to make a better life. And there you go. And so now, it is time to light the second chalice, so that as our children and youth go to their chapels, they carry the light of our flame with them. And may it illuminate and inspire them as it does to us.
We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our minds and hearts and who we want to wrap in our love and care. We'll kindle light this morning for Jan Woodward as she is struggling with the harsh effects for her cancer treatment. Also, it is our coffee god, Alan Foster's birthday this week. And since Alan keeps us in coffee, make sure to say hi to him and give him wishes as you walk by after the service today. And now let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts this morning. You are welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing. Those named aloud and those remembered in the silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. And now we will enter into meditation with a poem by our speaker, Paul Lindholdt. It is an internal monologue spoken by an old man who falls asleep during a sermon. Called Here and Now. The hymn book slips from my fingers. My adult children across the aisle shoot savage glances at me, but too late, some inner spirit stirs, and already I am entering a wood where Jeremiah's too loud sermon cannot follow. I step through a wall of sumac, and the sudden autumn bush explodes in grouse wings. My heart reels beside them through the leaves. Feathers and fruit fall, blaze and decay. None of these may alarm me when the smell of leaf mold heavens my senses and wing beats blunt the pain of age. And our reading today is another poem by Paul. It's titled Landfall, and it is a love letter from a mariner to his daughter at home. Daughter, it's the landfall of my voyage that will bring me back to you. The best reprieve after weeks at sea still doesn't come and won't show, and withholds from us the scent of soil, the sight of shorebirds, oak leaves afloat on swells. For you, sweetness, I hired a sailor to clamber up the main mast after dark and lay his hands on a falcon settled there to rest. I shall feed her on boiled eggs and salt pork. I shall stitch an Afghan hood from serge. By the time you are a woman grown, she will be flying for you, my Louisa, if you choose to tame a creature of the wind. Yourself and hawk and bonnet strings, partaking in the sport of kings, may make the lowly ground birds cower. Thank you so much, Paul Grove, for that beautiful music. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce my friend Paul Lindholdt. Paul is a professor of English at Eastern Washington University. He focuses his courses and research on the environmental humanities. His 9 books include In Earshot of Water, an ecological memoir that won the Washington State Book Award, and the edited essay collection, The Spokane River.
How are you? Oh, good. One always wonders. I have a friend in Texas. Robert Brown is an astrologer. He'll make an appearance shortly in my remarks. He asked the question this way: how are you? I'm channeling Robert. I had the good fortune to travel to Thailand just a few months ago with my family, and I found a word for this gesture. And so I give it to you now as a form of greeting in Thailand. Of course, in yoga studios, it's used to conclude the practice. But it's called the Y, W-A-I, and so I greet you with the Y from Thailand now. I'd like to thank a number of people here, and I'd like to do that by having you help me do snap fingers when I name them. People who are too rarely acknowledged, I think. First of all, Deb for the music for so many years. I had a moment of near panic a few weeks ago when I came and she wasn't here, and I thought, oh no, she's gone. But she's going to stay forever. I want to also thank Maria Ladich for enlisting me. She's ushering back here, so thank you, Marina, for enlisting me for this great honor. And then Betsy Lawrence for leading. Betsy and I go back at least 20 years when she was a student in my program at Eastern Washington University, got a degree in literature, and was so good that straight out of the gate she got herself a job as a professor. So I feel like I'm among friends here, and many others, and whom I will name shortly. I've been attending UU churches in Bellingham and Moscow and Pocatello for a long time, all of them. And so this one now is my home, and I thank you for being so welcoming to everybody. Preparing my remarks for today, I did not ask, what would Jesus do? I asked, how would Todd dress? And not to emulate him, but he would wear slacks, a gray jacket to match the hair, a plain shirt with no tie. I wish him well and commend you for choosing him to lead this congregation. I've been reading his book, The Gadfly Papers, and his stories about university culture, especially political correctness and virtue signaling, really embarrassed me because I'm a product of that culture. No matter how much I might object to it, I am a product of politically correct university culture. So I told you this would be a confessional in part. My PhD is in early American literature and culture, and I thought it would be helpful to remind you of some of the beliefs of the old Puritans from 300 and 400 years ago. One of those beliefs is the belief in election. The notion of election is one that held that 10% of every invisible church was destined to be saved and sit on the right hand of God the Father Almighty, etc. Other 90% were destined to burn in everlasting hellfire. But the tension was nobody knew who was who, so they're all scrutinizing one another, looking for signs. Lord, give us a sign that my friend is a sinner so I can castigate him. There's also a lovely image I might stick with you like it always has for me, Ben Franklin's wheelbarrow. Ben Franklin, of course, is one of the signers of the Declaration, and although he is not a Puritan, he came from that background and translated for him with his work ethic as virtue signaling to wheel his wheelbarrow through the streets of Philadelphia to demonstrate to everybody how very, very industrious he was. So this is some of our inheritance as Americans, it seems to me. I had the very good fortune when I was doing my bachelor's and master's degrees in Bellingham at Western Washington University to study under Annie Dillard. Anybody ever heard of her? All right, a few people have heard of her. She has a story that I want to quote at a little length now about missionary travel, because of course that's my topic today, is travel. And so here goes. I read about an Eskimo hunter who asked the local missionary priest, if I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell? No, said the priest, not if you did not know. Then why, the Eskimo earnestly asked him, did you tell me? I told you I was going to do a lot of name dropping here today because I feel so at home, I guess. So I remember and commend the late Julian Powers, as many of you do. Got asked for a show of hands at the 9:15 service. Everybody raised hands here. I commend Julian chiefly because he clanged alarms about global warming a quarter century ago, before it was fashionable to do so, you might say. My wife and I, Karen, have many fond memories of Julian, but fondest of all was participating in a protest in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, about the rock-ribbed Idaho Senator Larry Craig. Some of you old enough to remember how he sold our public lands away to clear cutting. And so a bunch of us went over there to protest this. He was in a building, having a meeting, and when his motorcade came out, we wanted to mob it. And Julian somehow brought his bicycle all the way over there and was circling the building waiting for Larry Craig to appear. And sure enough, he Craig found a rear exit, and Julian hailed us all and chased the motorcade on the bicycle. There, we are on to you. And so that was a fond memory of Julian Powers from long ago. Jane and Julian had a map. Jane, I'm sure you'll remember. And I want to thank Jane for all she's done for this congregation over the years here too. Jane, this is for Jane. You don't stand up to yourself. You had a map in your kitchen, as I remember, a map of the world that was studded with push pins about all the places they had traveled. And I remember just gazing up in my innocence, having done little to no travel at that time myself, thinking, wow, could somebody really go to all these places? If Julian were here, I'd congratulate him about his foresight on global climate change. Then I would politely ask him, given all we know about atmospheric CO2, how one can reconcile all that traveling with the belief in global climate change. It's atmospheric CO2 from aircraft. So now I numb you with some statistics, for which I apologize. Some 11% of all transportation-related emissions in the United States originate in the aviation industry. 3 billion U.S. passengers hop on 20,000 planes each year. Those numbers are projected to double by mid-century. The best way to reduce our carbon footprint, the New York Times says, is to fly less. Personal carbon dioxide, that emitted by each of us every year, is measured by the metric ton. And if it sounds like I'm guilting you, I'm not at all. I'm part of the problem, as I will confess. But first, we had a rare moment when the skies cleared right after 9/11. You might remember that Canada and the U.S. both shut down civilian and commercial air travel for 3 days. And if you're clever enough to find it on the internet, you can see an animated map of all of the planes flying before the towers were hit, and then boom, they all stopped. And not only was the sound pollution deadened, but also the air literally cleared. Scientists had an opportunity for the first time ever to measure the impact of contrails and the ways it affects global climate change. My topic is tourist travel, and it's part of a book, and so I welcome people to give me input. After the 9:15 service, I got some fantastic input from members of this congregation, food for thought. Travel has become a crusade for me, though the word crusade is hard to use in religious settings. You got it before I could even say. Hard to use in religious settings, given how Christians persecuted Muslim infidels during the Middle Ages. We are all balls of contradictions, including me, perhaps me in particular. You see, my wife loves to travel. Like politics, marriage is a delicate art of compromise. And so, in the past 20 years, we have traveled to Belize, Costa Rica, French Polynesia, Hawaii, Italy, Mexico, Singapore, Spain, and Thailand. 3 times we have sojourned in France. Still, I regard tourist travel with a skeptical eye. After doing a lot of soul searching, the old Puritans did that, by the way, I must be a product myself. After an abundance of soul searching, I learned that I have an inborn aversion to travel, which has got me writing and researching this book, which won't be done for another year or so. Marina, Karen tells me, feels most alive when traveling. And so does Karen. And Marina and Karen both work as attorneys representing foster youth in Eastern Washington, so I hear about Marina. Imagine how that works out in a marriage, though. One spouse most alive, the other travel averse. There are words for travel aversion in several languages. In Greek, it is hotophobia, or maybe hodophobia, H-O-D phobia. It translates literally fear of the path. In German, it is Reisefieber, which translates literally travel fever. And the word fever is conflicted enough, there's enough semantic noise that it means multiple things in our English language. So you can have a fever to do something. I'm really excited, I'm thrilled, I can't wait. That's one form of fever. But the way the Germans use it is that you're sick. When you're sick, you have a fever. And so Reisefieber is the fever that tends upon travel, international tourist travel in particular. Last, the Swedes, in very recent years, have coined a new word called flygskam. Anybody heard of it before? Flygskam literally translates flight shame. Flygskam, flight shame. So whether one shames oneself or shames others or just has a word there to resonate when you're thinking about ticketing, there's that word, flygskam. And so it comforts me to know that I'm not alone in my travel aversion. More statistics, more numbing statistics. We measure tourist travel by flights taken, money spent, and carbon spewed. Between 1950 and 2018, international tourist travel arrivals grew from 25 million to 1.4 billion worldwide. That's an increase. I had to turn to my kid who's a math whiz to figure this out for me. An increase of 5,600% in tourist travel. During the same period, by comparison or contrast, the global population increased from 2.5 billion to 7.6 billion, an increase of only 297%. To put those numbers into perspective, tourism grew faster than the planetary population by a rate of 1,885%. Such growth is dwarfed by the very few sad remedies available to us to combat it. Electric cars, I bet some of you came here in an electric car, or at least hybrid like I did. Solar power, one makes you feel good at least, but is it really able to compete? Yeah, we got solar panels installed a few years ago, like maybe Jane did. And then carbon offsets, where corporations trade offsets. So we're in a mess, the climate scientists. I'm no scientist, but I take their word for it. So my book, when I finish it, will be a buzzkill, my wife said. It'll be a big old buzzkill. And she's right. When I told our oldest son, 22-year-old in Seattle, about it, he responded, "Who would want to read such a book?" And so I have to acknowledge that as someone trained in critical inquiry, I guess that killing buzzes is my gift. I promised that my astrologer friend Robert would show up in my remarks again. We Unitarians, by and large, are too rational to really give much credence to astrology, right? But it is fascinating to me, and especially getting to know somebody who does that. So Robert, educated me on the habits of a Taurus like myself. We love home comforts. Any other Tauruses here? Yeah, very few. Wow, we're short attended. We love home comforts. We love to run our toes through shaggy carpets in our living room floors and luxuriate in the home. We are earth signs who need to be grounded. My totem is the Titan Atlas from Greek mythology. Atlas was sentenced forever to hold the planet on his shoulders. Heavy weight, right? He was finally done in when Hercules wrestled him and lifted him off the ground, and once he was disconnected from planet Earth, he perished. I am going to wrap up by addressing 5 questions that guest speakers are invited to address, and the first of those is, who am I? I am one who is more privileged than 96% of my fellow Earthlings. I am privileged enough to fly to international tourist destinations often. Privilege defines me, and certain obligations come with that privilege. That number of 96% who cannot travel, cannot afford, don't have the time, don't have the resources, comes from Seattle-based travel writer Rick Steves. So we're in the 4%. A lot of talk about the 1%. We're very wealthy, who control 2/3 of the wealth in this nation. But the 4% is something else to think about. So that's the question, who am I? How do I know what I know? My authorities include travel writer Rick Steves. He's got an interesting set of governing principles for how to travel politically. I invite you to check that out online. Another authority of mine is a Wall Street Journal. It used to be too conservative for me to read, but it's changed recently. And Wall Street Journal rates international travel among the world's largest industries. And that's one of the premises of my book, is that tourist travel, with all its many tentacles, like an octopus or a squid, with all its many tentacles, it is the largest industry on the planet. It rivals manufacturing and petroleum in terms of the size of it. How else do I know what I know? My own conscience tells me. I am in the 4% of the population that spends $7.4 trillion yearly indulging itself with travel. Buzzkill, huh? A third question we are invited, not required, but invited to address is, who or what is in charge? This is very cynical and political on my part, but corporations are. Corporations are in charge. And that the presence of corporations in tourist travel is just enormous. It's inestimable. It's inseparable, the two are. What the practice of travel lacks is a spiritual element, it seems to me, an element that is entirely appropriate for this house of worship. And maybe you can help me brainstorm ways that we can make travel more spiritual. A fourth question we are invited to address: what is my purpose? Mine is to live an examined life following Socrates, who of course taught Plato. Socrates is perhaps most famous for saying, the unexamined life is not worth living. He, of course, Socrates, was executed for, this sounds so strange today, disbelieving in the gods of the state, or impiety as it's sometimes translated. And then, more memorably, he was executed for corrupting the youth of Athens. So don't do that. Last question. What does my death mean? My death means traveling someplace I have never been. I hope my death means leaving remnants of an examined life behind. Remnants that will live within my students and my family as they travel.
We're going to sing a favorite hymn this morning. It's Blue Boat Home. It's in your turquoise hymnal, or of course on the screen. I was rereading the lyrics to this hymn in view of our speaker today and his sermon, and was reminded that the imagery is really of us all being on this ship, this planet of ours, and traveling through space together rather than running around on the ship. So please rise as you're willing and able to sing Blue Boat Home.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, ever great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom,
I'll give it to you. And you can, yes, you're beautiful. I know beautiful. Oh, I just think it's so where we all end up at times. So yeah, it's here and then into here. So you can, Google the journey if you want to like brought it for her, but that will help remind you.
I
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Here.